Hi, here is Markku Wilenius, your traveling futurist. I want to address now something which as a topic has become much more important after what has happened in Ukraine and in world general. I mean, sustainability challenge that we have and that we need to be tackling. The starting point of that challenge is what is happening in our energy sector, because energy sector is a core of those type of activities that has direct linkage to the climate, to our societies in general. So what happens with the energy, that's always been an important component of our society. That is happening also in regard to sustainability. So starting from the basic facts, the fact is that still some 80% of the global energy production happens using fossil fuels. 80%. And only something like 10 to 15% comes from renewables, where we want and need to be heading. So this is a huge difference. And we have been waiting actually for some time this energy revolution to come. But I have a sense that it's now coming for three particular reasons. The first reason is that when it comes to the renewable energies, particularly using solar energy in the form of the PV, and when it comes to use of the wind energy, and when it comes to battery technology. In all of these three key areas, the last decade saw tremendous change, which means that the prices went down quite dramatically and the capacity went up. So when it comes to the price of the PV panels, for instance, it came down 10 times of the amount that you needed to use your money to create a certain amount of the kilowatt. In wind energy, the price did not go down so dramatically, but it still went considerably down. And in battery, it was something like a revolution. It came down something like 100 times. Now, all of this is now paving the way for this decade to be the first decade when we really start to deploy on the grand scale these renewable energies. And even if we are now crippled with many other things and the economy in general is stagnated, once we get over these worst times, I think the serious investments will start. But there are two other reasons. The second reason is global warming. You could say some 10-15 years ago, well, there is something happening in our climate and there is a little bit strange weather phenomena happening here and there. But now this picture has totally changed. The climate change is happening all the time, everywhere, and we can recognize that. More extreme droughts, more extreme heats, massive floods, temperature going up and down like a jump jack flash. So there is a systemic change taking place in our climate because of what we have introduced to the atmosphere, which is more carbon and more other greenhouse gases. Because if you go and look at what the fundamental fact of the climate change is, yes, it is that the atmospheric concentration of the carbon dioxide is steadily growing. Whatever we have been trying to do, it's growing. And it has been growing ever since we started to measure that, which was by the end of the 1950s. And that's the basis, because that's exactly something that we need to do something about. We need to stop the increase of the atmospheric levels of carbon. That's the most important task that we have as a humanity. Now, in the last years, what have we really learned? Pandemic times, suddenly we found ourselves to be in the situation where we had to shift dramatically the way we operate. When physical connection was almost like cancelled, we needed to have the virtual connection in place. And that happened in the schools, in the working places, in our personal lives, everywhere. Even if we were not very happy we were still able to move very quickly. So we can move actually if there is a pressure that is high enough. We can change. The second lesson in the last years is this dependency. In this case, dependency on the energy sources that for some reason becomes unavailable. And this was, of course, what happened when this war in Europe started. We learned in Europe in a hard way what is it that if we put ourselves into the position where we are really vulnerable. Because what we need to be doing in this center is that we need to build our resilience because more surprises are to come. This is because of the nature of our highly complex system called our global society. And the third, what we have learned is exactly this climate change and the way that in spite of our efforts, we have not been able to do too much to that, to change the trend. Now the coming winter will be hard for Europe. It's gonna be a lot of shortage. And that is the further lesson for us. But what comes after that? After that should come actually realization that this is all a byproduct of 70 years of exponential growth as modern societies. The exponential growth of our economies in such a way that the trends and how they have been accelerating as a result of this globalized economy. It's been a massive. And it has resulted in the world in which we are now. The world in which we have the problem with nature. Our relationship is not okay. The fact that we are so much connected in so many ways. So this interconnectivity of the world has become very tangible. Also, it has become very clear that we have a certain path dependency here. We have been building a kind of a society and kind of economy in particular that is clearly not sustainable. But still we're sticking to that because we don't really find alternatives. Maybe Bhutan has found it, but that does not necessarily make us very illustrious. We need to find our own alternatives. And lastly, due to this interconnectivity, we are now in the world where people move, goods move, services move, ideas move, everything moves. So what is it that we need in that type of the society? We need particularly empathy. We need to understand other ways of looking at things, other worldviews, other ways of doing. And that is also something that we need to know much more about when we have actually entered to this highly interconnected world. Now we are moving into era of new technologies. We have artificial intelligence, we have blockchain, we have IoT, we have so much more. And yet, it's not these technologies that will make us happy. It's the way we use these technologies which decides, because technology has always been, since we first started to use logs of wood or bones, we have always used that as a means to an end. So this is what technology is all about. So we still need an idea where we want to use them for. And of course, we all wish that we would use it for sustainability. But today we are not really grasping that yet deep enough. Which then lead me to say that we need particularly leadership. And I don't mean that there needs to be a great leader somewhere that says where to go. That's a bit old-fashioned. We need to have a collective leadership. Where do we want to go and how do we get there? Because if we don't have it, we are like a little bit like a floating in the waves and not really taking control of our lives. So we need to be asking some really concrete questions. How do we go from here to another kind of the future? What does it mean in ways we are running our lives, our businesses, our societies? And most of those questions still remain unanswered. Still a way to go that we really start answering those tough questions. But to tackle those sustainability challenges, we need to be doing that. And I'm saying here that actually the world is very fast teaching us. It's nudging us, pushing us to that direction. And that's why we have some of these hardships. But as I said, we need to take the control of our own destinies and futures. Because in a very fundamental way, future is in our hands at present. You know, what will happen and what should happen too is that we're getting actually closer to nature, because there's a lot of intelligence and wisdom in nature. And what I mean by that our technologies have to learn from nature how they operate, how the circulation goes around, how the waste become a raw material for something new, and how this circularity and organic way of looking at life is really distilled into our economies and societies. That's why we are building right now the new idea of the bioeconomy. It's not the same as it used to be, making timber and paper. It must be something much more intelligent. And it involves a serious investigation and research to understand what are those type of the properties in the forest, in the algae, in all kinds of a living form that we could make use and build this much more sustainable society, whether it is about energy production, whether it's about our medicine, whether it's about our clothes, whether it's about our food. But there, the most important thing is that we do something the way that we are a part of these natural cycles to take the carbon out from the atmosphere where it is currently in the wrong place, or some of that. Not all. So we need to take our resources at use, and we have resources. We have agricultural land, we have the forest, where we can tie as much as we need this carbon. But not only doing that, we can also rejuvenate and reinvigorate our agriculture to make it in a much more healthy basis. We can reforestate the much of the areas where forests have been long gone. We can make this earth much greener and much healthier. But that requires that we stop thinking our pitiful national interest only, that we really share this globally. And spiritually, we're not there as yet, but we're getting closer, because ultimately we have no other chance. We don't. But the question, of course, remains that will it happen too late? And that is hard to answer, but what is quite clear is that already this decade there needs to happen some real big changes. So expect that to happen. And maybe we will do something that will create this new, much more sustainable society in the world. Subscribe to my channel and learn more about the future.